Hello my dear viewers, welcome back to my channel English Let's Simplified. I hope you are doing great. For today's video lecture, we will be discussing one of the famous renowned romantic English novels, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Before understanding the novel, we will be knowing about the early life and major works of the novelist Jane Austen. We will be covering her early life, education, literary career, writing style, her major works, death, and also her criticism. So without further ado, let's get started. Jane Austen was a famous English novelist belonging to the Georgian era. She was born in Steventon, Hampshire, England on 16th of December 1775. Her father was George Austen, who was a rector in a local parish, and her mother was Cassandra Leigh. Now Jane was the seventh of 8 children in the family. She shared a deep, intimate relationship with all her siblings, especially her older sister Cassandra. Now Cassandra played an extremely major role in Jane's life. She never chose to get married, and Cassandra preserved most of Jane's novels, including some of her unfinished works. Austen's family belonged to a lower gentry. Despite coming from a humble background, the family was intellectually driven, as the members in the family were well educated and they shared common interests in reading, putting up amateur theatricals, and also engaging themselves in the longer group discussions. Now Jane and her siblings were introduced to extensive reading of various literary works ranging from dramas, poetries, histories, etc. right from their early age, with the help of their father, who was responsible in setting up a well-stocked library for his children. It is due to this early exposure to various literary works, it developed her interest into writing and also enhanced her creativity. If we talk about Austen's education, Jane's formal schooling was quite brief. It's believed that Cassandra and Jane attended a couple of boarding schools in Steventon and then in Southampton, but she could not continue her education further because of the financial constraints and due to her illness. Therefore, most of her education happened at home. Her father played a major role in educating her. Most of her education happened at her father's well-stocked library. Therefore, her father was responsible in her academic life, and also he was the main figure who stimulated her passion towards writing. If we talk about Jane Austen's personal life, Jane Austen never chose to get married, despite the fact she had a few romantic interests. None of her relationships or romantic interests because of financial constraints and social barriers. Therefore, most of her life circled around her family, especially after her father's sudden demise. The family was left devastated and they were stuck in financial difficulties, due to which the family had to move to various places, starting from Steventon to Bath and then Southampton, and then finally they settled in a place called Chawton. Let us now talk about her literary career and her major works, including her writing style. To talk about Jane's literary career, she started writing quite early. She produced most of her work between the late 1780s and continued to write mostly until her death in the year 1817. At a very early age, she started writing her juvenilia, which was a significant body of work compiled into different books titled as Volume the First, Volume the Second, and Volume the Third. Now these juvenilia contained short stories which were satirical and parodic in nature. They revealed her developing wit and her early interactions with literary conventions and social absurdities. Most of her major works were published in the 1800s. Her first work was published when she was 35, And the very first famous novel written by Jane Austen was Sense and Sensibility, which was published in the year 1811. Earlier, the book was titled as Eleanor and Marian. Later on, the name was changed to Sense and Sensibility. Another of her famous novel was Pride and Prejudice, which turned out to be extremely popular and established her as a significant voice in the contemporary literature. Now, the novel Pride and Prejudice was published in the year 1813. It was earlier titled as First Impressions. We then have Mansfield Park, which was published in the year 1814, and then finally in the year 1815 there was another novel by the title Emma. Now, all these novels were published during her lifetime and they were published anonymously. Back in the 19th century, women were not allowed to pursue academic careers or anything else beyond the household chores. Women did not enjoy a lot of freedom and equality in the society. Therefore, just like all other female writers of those times, Jane Austen also decided to keep her identity a secret. Therefore, most of her works were published under the title By a Lady. Apart from these 4 novels, there are 2 other novels which were published posthumously, that is after her death in the year 1817, and the 2 novels are Northanger Abbey and Persuasion. These 2 novels were published with the help of her brother Henry, who was the main reason behind negotiating with various publishers. And these were the 2 novels which actually revealed her identity, and they were published for the first time under the name Miss J. Austen. Apart from these 6 major novels, there are 2 unfinished works of Jane Austen, which are The Watsons and The Sanditon. If we talk about her writing style, her novels are characterized by their sharp wit, irony, satire, and keen observation of the social customs and manners, insightful exploration of human relationships, particularly in the context of courtship and marriage. Her novels mainly focused on the lives of the English gentry, especially the upper class landed English gentry, their social interactions and economic considerations, and also the moral dilemmas that her characters face in her novels. Her use of wit, irony, social commentary, and free discourse, the complex character development, provides the readers an access into the internal thoughts and feelings of her protagonists, contributing to the psychological depth of her work. In the year 1816, Jane Austen's health began to deteriorate, and in the month of May 1817, she moved to Winchester so that she could stay close to her doctor for regular health checkups. Her illness got worse, and it's believed that she died on 18th of July 1817 in Winchester. The exact cause of her death is not known. There are various theories suggesting that she had Addison's disease, and some other theories suggest she had some other illness. If we talk about Jane Austen's criticism, the critical reception of Jane Austen's work have significantly evolved during her lifetime. She received modest success and limited fame during her lifetime, as most of her publications were anonymous. As I said earlier, back in those days, women writers did not choose to reveal their identity due to the social conditions and the social barriers. Due to this anonymity of her publications, she did not receive any awards or worldwide fame during her lifetime. It was in the 19th century, that is only after her death, her reputation began to grow gradually. Some of the critics appreciated for her masterful use of language, satire, wit, and beautiful narrative style, while others criticized her for depicting limited segment or limited perspective of the landed gentry, her social world was confined and limited. Most of the critics criticized her for picking up the repetitive themes and plots, as most of her novels revolved around the themes of love, marriage, courtship, social class, reputation, etc. They argued that she never looked beyond the domestic realms of the landed gentry. Some believe that she ignored most of the historical and political changes that happened during her lifetime. Now, Austen wrote many works during the Georgian and Regency period, which was famous for its Napoleonic Wars and Industrial Revolution. Therefore, the critics argued that Jane did not focus in any of the historical or the social changes that happened during her time. Despite her relatively short life, the initial anonymity of her publications, Jane Austen's insightful use of social commentary, writing style, and enduringly relatable characters have secured her a special place in English literature. That was all about the novelist Jane Austen. Let us now understand the summary of the novel Pride and Prejudice. Before understanding the summary, let us go through the different characters so that understanding the novel becomes easier. So, the first character is of Elizabeth Bennet. Now, Elizabeth Bennet is the second of 5 sisters, and she is known for her free, independent spirit. The character of Elizabeth is quite prejudiced in the initial stages of the novel, as we get to see that she develops a deep hatred and feelings of dislike towards Darcy. Her feelings of prejudice eventually change as the novel progresses, and we get to see that she gets married to Mr. Darcy. Now, Elizabeth Bennet is very close to her sister Jane Bennet. The next character here is of Mr. Darcy, who is a wealthy and aloof friend of Mr. Charles Bingley. Now, Darcy comes across as a reserved and arrogant young man who has a dislike towards the people belonging to the lower class. It's only because of this particular attitude Elizabeth begins to dislike him. And as the novel progresses, we get to see that the character of Darcy realizes his flaws and overcomes his flaw of pride and eventually gets married to Elizabeth. The next character here is of Jane Bennet, who is the eldest daughter of the Bennet family. She is a good-natured, sweet and beautiful young woman, and she's very close to Elizabeth Bennet. Jane Bennet gets married to Mr. Charles Bingley. Okay. The next character is of Mr. Bennet, who is the father of the Bennet sisters. Now, Mr. Bennet prefers to isolate himself in his library, and he cares very much for his 2 eldest daughters, Jane and Elizabeth, because he has not secured a financial future for his family. After his death, his estate is entailed to his cousin. Now, Mr. Bennet comes across as an apprehensive father who is extremely worried about his daughters' futures, especially Jane and Elizabeth. He spends most of his time in his library and away from social life. He is also apprehensive over the fact that he could not secure a proper future for his daughters, as the Bennet estate is going to be inherited by his cousin, Mr. Collins. The next character we have is of Mrs. Bennet. Now, Mrs. Bennet comes across as a superficial woman who is obsessed with the idea of getting her daughters married off into wealthy households. and she stands as an embarrassment to Jane and the other Bennet daughters due to her extreme obsession with wealth and prosperity. The character of Mary Bennet is very plain and unsociable. She enjoys singing and playing piano. We then have Catherine Kitty Bennet, who is the second youngest Bennet daughter. She is known for her silly, ignorant nature. We then have Lydia. She is the youngest of the Bennet daughters, and now the character of Lydia Bennet is quite immature and reckless, who lacks responsibility, as we get to see that in the novel she elopes with George Wickham, and the Bennet family is devastated as it would bring them a lot of disgrace and ruin their reputation in the society. However, Mr. Darcy intervenes and saves the family's reputation. The next character is of Charles Bingley. Now, Charles Bingley is a dearest friend to Fitzwilliam Darcy. He is a young wealthy man who rents Netherfield Park, and Charles Bingley falls in love with Jane Bennet, and in the end of the novel he gets married to Jane. Next we have Caroline Bingley and Louisa Hurst. Now, two of these ladies are Mr. Charles Bingley's sisters, and we get to see that Caroline dislikes Jane and the Bennet family, as she constantly warns Charles Bingley to stay away from the Bennet family, as they are socially low and come from a lower gentry. Therefore, the Bingley sisters do not love the idea of Charles Bingley getting married to Jane Bennet. We then have Mr. Hurst, whose character is not very significant. Mr. Hurst is Louisa's husband, that is Charles Bingley's brother-in-law. We then have William Collins. Now, William Collins is a clergyman who is self-obsessed, and he is a cousin of Mr. Bennet. It's he who is going to inherit the Bennet household after Mr. Bennet's death. The character of Mr. Collins proposes to Elizabeth, and due to his self-obsessed nature, Elizabeth rejects him. So he immediately gets married to Elizabeth's friend, Charlotte Lucas. Because Mr. Bennet has no male heir, Mr. Collins, being his cousin, is entailed to inherit the Bennet household. Character here is of George Wickham, who is a notorious scoundrel, and he is responsible to ruin the image of Darcy in the Elizabeth's eyes, and also he tries to initially elope with Darcy's younger sister Georgiana, and in the novel finally he elopes with the youngest Bennet daughter, that is Lydia. We then have Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner, who are the Bennet sisters' uncle and aunt, and they are believed to be well-wishers, and they give good guidance to the Bennet sisters, and their role is more prominent than Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. We then have Charlotte Lucas, who is Elizabeth's friend, and she gets married to Collins. Now, Charlotte Lucas comes across as a very pragmatic, practical woman who is unromantic and believes in getting married for financial security rather than love and mutual understanding. We then have the character of Lady Catherine de Barrow. Now, Lady Catherine de Barrow is Darcy's aunt, and she is Mr. Collins' patroness as well. Now, she displays constant dislike towards the Bennet family, and she tries to stop Elizabeth and Darcy's marriage as well. We then have Georgiana Darcy, who is Darcy's younger sister, and in the novel we get to know that George Wickham tried to elope with Darcy's younger sister Georgiana. These are the characters of the novel Pride and Prejudice. Now that we got to know about the characters, let us understand the summary of the novel Pride and Prejudice. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice is a timeless romantic novel that satirizes social conventions and explores the themes of love, marriage, class, and reputation of the early 19th century England. The play focuses on the character development of its two main protagonists, Miss Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, as they overcome their initial biases. Now, the novel opens with the excited anticipation surrounding the arrival of a wealthy young man, Mr. Charles Bingley, who rents the nearby estate of Netherfield Park. Now, Mr. Charles Bingley is extremely wealthy and he is accompanied by his two sisters, Caroline and Louisa, and also his dearest friend, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, who is an extremely influential, aristocratic, and an arrogant, proud man. Now, the local society, especially Mrs. Bennet, is consumed by the thought of getting her daughters married off into a wealthy household. As we discussed earlier, Mr. Bennet has not achieved much in his life, therefore there is no financial security to the Bennet family, as the Bennet household is going to be inherited by Mr. Bennet's cousin, Mr. Collins. Therefore now Mrs. Bennet is extremely apprehensive of the future of her 5 daughters. Therefore she is obsessed by the fact that Mr. Charles Bingley has arrived in their neighborhood and she wishes to marry off at least one of her daughters into the Bingley household. A local ball is arranged in a town where Mr. Charles Bingley is quickly attracted towards the beautiful Jane Bennet, who is the eldest Bennet daughter, and their admiration and mutual appreciation quickly blossoms. On the other hand, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, who despite having a handsome appearance and a lot of wealth, attracts a lot of disrespect and hatred around him due to his condescending remarks for the people who are from the lower class. He refuses to dance with Elizabeth Bennet and also makes condescending remarks about her appearance and mocks her social status. Due to this arrogant behavior, Elizabeth develops extreme disrespect and dislike towards Darcy. Therefore, very quick initial impressions of pride and prejudice are formed, which lead to a lot of misunderstandings in the novel. In the middle of all this, we get to see that another significant character emerges, who is Mr. William Collins, a cousin of Mr. Bennet. Now, Mr. Collins also tries to propose Elizabeth. As he is extremely self-obsessed, it quite irritates Jane, therefore she rejects his marriage proposal. Now, Mr. Collins shifts his affections towards Elizabeth's friend, Charlotte Lucas, who instantly accepts his marriage proposal because Charlotte believes that marriage is extremely important in order for women to gain respect in the society and also to have financial security. She is not someone who believes in marrying for love or mutual understanding. She believes in marrying for social and financial security, as she is more practical and pragmatic. We then get to see that when Elizabeth goes to visit Charlotte Lucas and Mr. Collins to Rosings Park, which is Lady Catherine de Borough's imposing estate, there she witnesses Darcy. Elizabeth's dislike and disrespect towards Darcy turns stronger when a villainous character, Mr. George Wickham, who is a military officer, tries to ruin Darcy's impression in Elizabeth's eyes. He narrates a fake story to Elizabeth stating that Darcy wrongfully robbed him of his rightful inheritance and made him homeless. It is due to this fabricated tale by George Wickham, Elizabeth begins to have serious feelings of prejudice towards Darcy. In the middle of this, Mr. Charles Bingley immediately leaves Netherfield Estate for London without any explanation. Now, Elizabeth thinks that Darcy is the main reason behind her sister Jane and Mr. Charles Bingley's separation. As Bingley's sisters never loved the Bennet sisters, they constantly mocked Jane and Charles' relationship. Therefore, Elizabeth is convinced that Darcy and Bingley's sisters might have conspired in separating Jane and Charles Bingley. Thus, her prejudice turns stronger due to Mr. George Wickham's fabricated tale and her sister Jane's heartbreak. It's during this time Mr. Darcy appears at Rosings Park and he shockingly ends up proposing Elizabeth. He expresses his admiration towards her wit and independent spirit. As Elizabeth is already predetermined that Darcy is the reason behind her sister's heartbreak and also his cruelty towards Mr. George Wickham, she quickly rejects his proposal. She blames him of his cruelty towards George Wickham and also his involvement in Jane and Bingley's separation. Shocked by these accusations, Darcy decides to write a long letter stating his explanation and also asking her to reconsider her prejudice. Darcy in his letter explains that he separated Jane and Charles because he believed that Jane was not as affectionate towards Charles as he was to her. He also exposes Wickham's true character by revealing the fact that Wickham had actually wrongfully inherited Darcy's property and he had also once tried to elope with his 15-year-old sister Georgiana. After reading this letter from Darcy, Elizabeth begins to rethink and re-evaluate her prejudice towards him. On a trip to Derbyshire along with her uncle and aunt, Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner, where she reluctantly visits Pemberley Estate. It actually belongs to Darby's aunt, Catherine de Barrow. Now, Elizabeth visits there reluctantly, thinking that Darcy will not be present over there. To her surprise, she finds Darcy over there, and Darcy comes across as extremely changed man. The way he behaves with the staff at the Pemberley Estate and the way he softly speaks to his younger sister proves Elizabeth that all this while she had been just prejudiced against him. It was all her misunderstanding about Darcy. She realizes that Darcy was not arrogant but rather a caring, generous young man. During this peaceful interaction, Elizabeth gets to hear a news of Lydia's scandalous elopement with Mr. George Wickham. Now, the entire Bennet family is extremely devastated, thinking that this elopement would bring a lot of disgrace and ruin the Bennet family's reputation in the society. Out of love towards Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy intervenes. He tracks down George Wickham and Lydia and secretly arranges for their marriage without revealing that he was involved in this secret marriage. He thus saves the Bennet family's reputation. As the Bennet family's reputation is restored, Elizabeth gradually gets to know that it was Darcy who was behind saving the family's reputation. And she also gets to know the various generous and kind works done by Darcy to the society. With the reputation of Bennet family being restored, we get to see that Mr. Charles Bingley returns to the Netherfield estate, and now Without anybody's interference, he proposes to Jane and the two of them get immediately engaged. Lady Catherine de Bourgh gets to hear a rumor about the impending engagement of Darcy and Elizabeth. She secretly visits the Bennet estate and tries to demand Elizabeth to promise that she would never marry Darcy, as it would ruin their reputation in the society. As Elizabeth comes from a lower background, Lady Catherine de Bourgh doesn't want her nephew Darcy to get married to Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth, being free-spirited and witty, refuses to make any such promise, which gives a hint to Darcy that her feelings towards him have changed. He tries to propose her for the one last time, and this time Elizabeth joyfully accepts. Thus the novel ends in the double marriage of Jane to Mr. Bingley and Elizabeth to Darcy, symbolizing the triumph of true love and mutual understanding over societal pressures, first impressions, and personal flaws. Let us now discuss the important themes of the novel Pride and Prejudice. The very significant theme of the novel is love and marriage. Most of Jane's works focused on this theme of love and marriage. In the novel Pride and Prejudice, we get to see the two different perspectives. Elizabeth, being free-spirited, believed in marrying out of love and mutual respect, whereas her friend Charlotte Lucas saw marriage as a source of security and safety. Through her novel, she tried to convey that marriage should happen based on love, intellectual compatibility, and mutual understanding, rather than for social or financial reasons. Another significant theme of the novel is pride. The character of Darcy is the perfect representation of pride in the novel. Due to his extreme hatred and condescending remarks towards the lower social sections, he comes across as an extremely arrogant man in the initial stages of the novel. However, we get to see that Jane Austen had beautifully tried to develop this character of Darcy, where he realizes his shortcomings, his personal flaw of pride, and gradually overcomes it in order to get married to Elizabeth. Yet another famous theme of the novel is prejudice. The character of Elizabeth represents prejudice, and through this theme, Jane Austen has tried to state that how first impressions can create a lot of misunderstandings. One must always look beyond the appearance in order to know the true character of a person. Therefore, the character of Elizabeth was seen to be too judgmental, and she was quite biased and prejudiced towards Darcy. Another significant theme of the novel: social class, status, and reputation. The novel mainly focuses on the themes of social class, as it tries to depict how the characters in the novel are obsessed with wealth, especially the character of Mrs. Bennet, and also how some of the characters look down upon or try to disrespect the people who come from the lower social status, especially the character of Darcy and also the Bingley sisters, who constantly look down upon the Bennet family. Therefore, the novel depicts rigid class systems, its obsession with reputation. As in the novel, when Lydia elopes with Mr. George Wickham, the Bennet family is shocked. They are concerned about their reputation getting ruined rather than thinking about Lydia's safety. Therefore, Jane Austen had tried to depict how social class was so important and how reputation mattered a lot to the early 19th century people. Individualism and societal pressures. Now, Through Elizabeth's character, Jane Austen had tried to challenge the predetermined societal norms. As we can say that Pride and Prejudice continues to resonate with the readers, the novel's keen insight into human nature ensures its place as a cornerstone of English literature. That was all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do subscribe and also hit the bell icon so that you get updated. I'll see you soon with yet another topic. Until then, stay tuned to English Lit Simplified.